Thus recuperated, I started off to call on Judge, to whom I had a letter of introduction from my agents in San Francisco. It did not take long to find the judge's quarters, the lanes, streets, and alleys being distinctions without any material differences. The mansion in which his judgeship roomed was a small shanty with a porch or veranda around it to keep off the sun where it happened to be hot, and the wet when it rained. I knocked with my knuckles, no reply, tried again, still silence. Resorted to the handle of my hunting knife, anything but mildly that did it. I rather calculate, stranger, that you'd better just open the door. I ain't going to. You bet your boots. I opened it and walked in. There sat Judge, in a large armchair cleverly balanced on the two hind legs. No, it was not sitting, or lying, or standing, or lounging. It was a posture compounded of all these positions. Judge's, legs were extended on level with his nose, and rested on the square table before him. He was smoking an immense cigar, one half of which was stowed away in his cheek, rolled about and chewed, whilst the other half protruded from the corner of his mouth, and reached nearly to his eye. A little distance from the judge was an immense spittoon, like a young sponging bath. He was whittling a piece of stick with a pocket knife, and looked the embodiment of supreme indifference. The chair he occupied and the table, whose only use, as far as I could see, was to rest his legs on, constituted the entire furniture. The judge himself was a long, spare man, and gave me the idea of an individual whose great attitude consisted in possessing length without breadth or thickness. Everything about him was suggestive of length. Beginning at his head, his hair was long, and his face was long, and his nose was long, and a long goatee beard terminated at the end of his chin. His arms were long, and his legs were long, and his feet were long, and he had a long, drawling utterance, and was inordinately long at arriving at a moderate pitch of civility. He eyed me over having drawled out, "Well." I handed my letter, and quietly awaited its effect. As he was long in everything else, he was long in opening it. Having a minute inspection of the interior, he slowly took it from the yellow envelope, and gradually seemed to understand from its contents that he was to be civil. "So you ain't been long in these parts, captain?" said the judge, without the smallest degree shifting in his position. I said I was quite a stranger, and should be glad if he could give me some information about the trails and the Indians along the routes I would intend taking. "Bars and steel traps," roared the judge. "You'll have your herons sure as beaver medicine. Why, there ain't worse for headskins in all Oregon than the Klamath. Just 3 months ago, from come Friday, the darned skunks came right along slick behind Dick Livingston and his gang. You heard of Dick, I guess?" I said I had not. "Well, most people has, leastways. They was just washing up a 12 days' work of Rogue River when the Klamath swarmed just as thick as mosquitoes in a swamp. Several went under, bet your life, for Dick and his boys wasn't the ones to cave in. But 'twant no use. The Reds just crowded them clean down and took half the horror off every one of them. The trail, too, is awful soft, Mo's Hart says, and he's out from Bogus Holler, where you have to go. That a mule is just as sure to mire down at most any place." "Well," I said, "your news is not by any means refreshing, Judge. Nevertheless, I mean going." "Well, Captain, maybe you're right. Making back tracks ain't good anyway. We are a go-ahead people, we are, and it won't pay to be skeerish. Anyway, suppose we go and take a drink, and I'll just put you down through the city. I guess I'm well posted about most things in here, Diggins." So we did the city, which did not take very much time to do. We did the stores where every person from the master to the errand boy did nothing but sit on the counter to chew, whittle, and spit. The amount of whittling done in this city is perfectly astounding. Every post supporting the verandas outside the stores with barrooms was whittled nearly through. Some of them in 2 or 3 places. We did the bar rooms and did the sundry drinks with divers people. I purchased provisions, hired a guide, took leave of the judge, who was not half a bad fellow when you understood him, and retiring to my inn, determined to enjoy the luxury of a bed and a long night in, having slept on the ground since leaving Red Bluff. And if the judge was right about the Indian, the chances were considerably against my ever stretching my limbs on another. So, to make the most of it, for a start up at sun up and a long ride added to a tedious day, that pretty well fagged me. I retired very early and turned in. It really was a lovely bed, just like the bathing in feathers. I stretched out my limbs until fairly cracked again, and rolled in enjoyment. My thoughts were soon wandering, and visions of home mixed up with mules falling over precipices, battling with Indians, an ugly feeling round the top of my head. Judges, drinks, rowdies, all jumbled together in a ghostly medley, floated off in misty indistinctness, and I subsided into the land of dreams. I awoke an indistinct idea that I was had a ball with a jiggy kind of tune whirling through my brain. Pish, I must have been dreaming. So I turned over and tugged the blankets more tightly round my shoulders, vexed that such a stupid dream should have awoke me. Hark, what on earth is that? Ladies and gents, take your places, salute your partners. Then crash went 2 fiddles, pounding out a breakdown. Again the voice, half right and left, and off they went. The sounds of countless feet scuffling rapidly over a floor told me in a language not to be mistaken that a ball was going briskly on very near my head. I sat up, rubbed my eyes, took a long mournful yawn, and began to consider what had best be done. I discovered that a thin wooden partition only intervened betwixt my head and the ballroom. Everything rattled to the jingling tune of the music and the dancers. The windows, the doors, the wash crockery, the bed all jigged, and I began to feel myself involuntarily nodding to the same measure, and jiggling mentally like the rest. Shades of the hearted, I could not stand this. Goodbye bed and feathers and sleep. I may as well dance in reality as in imagination, and abandoning all my anticipated delight, dressed and entered the ballroom. It was a long room, lighted with more candles hung against the wall and tin sconces. The company, if variety and charming, was perfect. The costumes, as a rule, were more suggestive of ease than elegance. Scarlet shirts and buckskin pants were in ascendant. The boots, as a rule, being of the species known as Wellingtons, were worn outside the trousers, to inducing the latter indispensable to assume a bunchiness about the knees, not calculated to display the symmetry of the leg to advantage. Very well, few had any jackets on, but all, without exception, carried a bowie knife and a 6-shooter around their waist belts. The ladies' costumes were equally varied. Most of them wore bright-colored muslins, and of very large patterns and showy waist ribbons, tied behind in a large bow, with streamers down to their heels. The dance was just down when I came into the room. I saw a few citizens I had met in the day, but each one seemed to have his fancy gal, and any chance of getting an introduction was a vain hope. The fashion, I discovered afterward, is either to bring or meet your partner at the ballroom, and dance with her, and her only, all the evening. A waltz was called, and I wanted a partner. Looking around, I espied a lady sitting near the end of the room, who evidently had not got one. She was in the same place when I entered the room, and it was clear to me by her unrumpled appearance that she had not danced the evening. Faint heart never won fair lady. might I imagined, apply as forcibly to dancing as to wooing or fighting. If I am snubbed, it won't be at all the world, and I suppose I shall live it down, so here goes. Walking boldly up to her, I asked coolly, but rather apologetically, if she would try a waltz. Guess, stranger, I ain't a fix-up for a waltzin'. Perhaps, madam, I said. You will excuse me, although unknown to you, if I ask you to dance the next coalition with me. Looking into my face with an expression half doubt, half delight, she said, stranger, I'll have the tallest kind of pleasure in putting you through right flick through a coalition. For I was here like a blue chicken on a pine log, till I would like to grow to the seat. This satisfactorily arranged, I sat down with her until this waltz finished, to have a good look at and trot out my new inmoranta. She was a blonde beauty with fair hair and light gray eyes that flashed and twinkled roguishly, and robed in some white material with blue ribbons in her hair. Round her waist, a mountain slip that any wanderer in search of a partner would have deemed himself lucky to have stumbled on. Our conversation was rather discursive, until I discovered that home politics, or rather the duties and requirements of a Gulf team, was a never-failing spring from which to draw fresh draughts of household knowledge. At last, the coalition was called by Master of Ceremonies, and again I heard, take your places and salute your partners. The fills started the same kind of jigging tune, and away we went.